All right, guys, well, I know I've been dragging this project out for a while, but really I've just been fitting in a few hours here and there in between work, a couple of late nights and things like that. But I finally had time to throw together a bunch of the video clips from my bumper build series and put together another YouTube video. So in this video, I'll finish painting the fascia and get that installed, and finish assembling the bumper, get that painted and put it in, and basically get all the parts bolted onto it. And then I'll save the wiring for the last video in the series. So I hope you guys enjoy. Well, check this thing out. After doing a little bit of research, I discovered that Nissan had an optional two-piece bumper, and this is the, what you'd call fascia or whatever, for that two-piece bumper. Then it fits right under the headlights here and gives me a flat surface to build my winch bumper up to. And it's basically the same thing as the bumper shell is. Right where this body line is on the bumper shell, this is basically the upper part for that. So I thought I was going to have to buy another bumper shell and cut that at the body line, but it turns out Nissan already made a part that should fit just perfectly. I don't know exactly what it's going to take to get it on there, but that's what we're going to do next. Yeah, it looks like it fits the same exact way as the big bumper does, using the plastic brackets at the fenders. And I see my holes line up right here on top, but get these little metal brackets hanging down that use the body clips in the old bumper. Obviously those have to be removed. Really, that looks like the only modification that needs to be done. Well, they do make a spot weld cutter, but I don't have one of those here, so drill bit will just have to do. It'll work pretty good. I'll just hit those with a short blast of paint and should hold up just fine. Time to get the rest of those off. Yeah, perfect. So that one lines up. That one lines up down there. Just as I figured, all these holes actually line up, so perfect. We'll get those plastic brackets on there, hit these spot welds with a little bit of paint, and pop this fascia into place, and then I'll have a flat area to work up against as I'm building my winch mount. Okay, we've got this fascia in place here and the grill on. Looks pretty good. Pretty much everything just bolted right into place. I'm gonna have to do something about these fender liners here. I don't know, I assume they make a different one for the two-piece bumper. But I definitely don't want all this stuff flopping around down here anyway. Part of the design of this bumper is gonna give me some more clearance to climb over obstacles. So I think, at least for now, I'm gonna cut both of these right along this line right here. I'm sure I'm going to end up going higher, probably following this this body metal right here, but for now this is safe. It gets these things out of the way and lets me back the truck in and out. Okay, with that bumper structure out of the way and the skid plate off of here, you can kind of start to see what I've got to work with. And it looks like my substructure that's going to hold my winch, I'm just going to make up a couple of plates that bolt on here and here, something to run between the two of them, and then a mount for the winch to sit right about here. and it doesn't look like it's going to be too terribly difficult. I am going to take the time to draw these up in CAD and actually make some radiused pieces so they're not just flat plates on there. And then if you can see under there, this is where the factory tow hooks are designed to bolt in. I'm going to make another piece that bolts on the bottom that's got some spacers on it, and we'll attach that here. That way we'll end up with 4 bolts on either side. They will be offset, this one right here. So we'll be working off of a couple of different planes, and it should make it plenty strong to support the full pull of that 9.5 XP I'm going to put on here. What I've got here is I've got my 9.5 XP for mock-up here, and I've got these mounts done, and so I've got one on each side, one on the driver and passenger side. Those bolt to the factory bolt locations for the factory bumper, and then there's tow hook bolts on the bottom of the frame here. And I had to space those down because this kind of comes down below the frame. I thought about cutting it off, but I really wanted to leave things factory, so I just cut out some 3/4 inch spacers right here and welded those onto this plate. Welded those 2 plates together so each of these assemblies can unbolt. Now what I'm working on now, I'm going to actually make the winch mounting plate, so I'm going to have a plate that goes between these two, and just a flat plate's not going to be strong enough to support the pull of the winch, but I'll weld some ribs onto it, and that will be strong enough. So this flat plate that goes between here, and then I've cut out one of these so far. I'm going to weld one on each side. Basically these go like this. I'll weld one on each side, and what this will allow me to do is to bolt the outer bumper assembly onto these holes right here. And that way the heavy part, the main mounting bracket with the winch on it and everything, will be separate from the outer bumper shell. So it's taken shape. A little bit slow. It's not a small project to design and cut out stuff like this, but making progress, and I'm going to keep at it. So that sheet, a 1/4 inch I've been working out of, these are the spacers that I cut out with it. I had to stack a few of them together and weld them together for each of the holes. I just didn't have a piece of stock big enough to make a big spacer on the lathe, so this was the way I did it. But each of these pieces have been cut out of my 1/4 inch, and we're going to cut out the other bracket out of that right now. So I got this lined up in the fire control. There we go. Now, plasma's not perfect. I got some of this dross left over on the back side, and you know, even with a fairly slow cut speed, there's a little bit of an angle to these cuts, just you know, where the kerf kind of trails behind the movement of the torch. And you know, I cut these holes. They're going to be 1/2 inch bolts, and I cut them a 1/16 oversized, but I'll still need to chase those with 9/16 drill bit in order to actually make the holes fully circular. But it only takes a minute to clean these up. Well, I've made some pretty good progress the last couple of days, and my I don't know, subframe, bumper subframe, is all the pieces are cut out and tacked into place, and basically I'm at the point now where I'm ready to pull everything off and finish weld it. was able to spend some time out here yesterday and made some decent progress. I got these side plates cut out right here, and I incorporated the skid plate into this. This is just a piece of 11 gauge flat bar, but I was able to make that line up and drill a couple of holes in that. I welded a couple nuts to the backside, so the factory skid plate is in its factory location. It'll be easily removed just by unbolting 4 bolts, and then the whole thing will drop back out. I've got this bottom plate cut right here. It's going to go right here. I haven't welded it into place yet because what I decided to do, you know, the more I got to looking at this winch is kind of cantilevered out here on this winch plate, even though I've got it gusseted a little bit in the back right here. There's only a rib on the bottom of this back plate, not one on the top. And I'm sure that if I put a full 9,500 pounds of pull on this, I'm sure what's going to happen is the bottom's real strong, but the top's not, and I think this whole assembly is going to flex down a little bit. I still think it's pretty strong. It would probably hold it, but I don't want to go bending up this new piece that I've created here. So before I put a full pull on it, what I'm going to do is weld some sleeves onto here that go up at the appropriate angle and made up with the bolts here. So the sleeves will come up and they'll have a flat washer welded on them, so that when I use a deep socket and run the bolts up through, it's going to bolt this plate to this plate right here. And that just adds a whole nother level of support. It basically ties this winch plate right here to this whole boxed assembly, and it's gonna really reinforce this winch plate, and it's also going to add strength to the bottom here. If I was to drop this thing onto a rock or something like that, instead of causing it to bend up, it just adds some extra strength. Let's see, what else? I've got an aluminum fairlead coming. Obviously I pulled the cable off here. I've got some synthetic line and that aluminum fairlead coming. That's going to be going right about here. And I've also got some big, thick, 1-inch thick D-ring, Weld-on D-ring mounts coming. I'm going to put one right there and one right there. Since this faceplate's going to be 11 gauge, that's not strong enough to support a D-ring like that. If I really pulled on it hard, it would end up bending. So I'm going to make up a couple of gussets that go behind here before I weld this faceplate on, and that'll really strengthen it up quite a bit, and it should handle those D-ring mounts just fine. So I'm going to put this plate back in the CNC table, cut out those ellipses, slide some sleeves up here, and we'll keep going. Okay, I want to cut out my 2 ellipses for my tie tubes here. The way I've calculated these ellipses is just with a basic triangle here. I'm going to be using some 1-inch Schedule 40 pipe, which is about 1 3/8 outside diameter. So we've got 1 3/8 right here. So if you imagine if this was a 90 degrees, my opening would be a 1 3/8 diameter. But because I'm turning it 17 degrees, that's the slope on the bottom of the angle on the bottom of my brackets right there. The major dimension of the ellipse needs to be longer than 1 3/8. So the minor dimension is 1 3/8. The major dimension is something longer. So if you draw this triangle here, basically you just take the diameter of the material you're working with, divide it by the cosine of the angle, and that gives you your hypotenuse here, your long dimension. So I just need to draw up an ellipse in AutoCAD that's got a minor dimension of 1 3/8 and a major dimension of 1.438, and make sure they're in the right place on here, and plug it into the CNC table and have it cut out my ellipses. Is it going to work? I don't know. That's a good math exercise out here in the shop, so I'm going to try it and see if everything lines up. Alright, I've got my 2 ellipses drawn here, and these should line up with the 2 winch mounting bolts in the front. Alright, I lined up my plate using my previous cut file to make sure the torch is centered at the right location. And I've got only the ellipses in here, so we'll send it on its way. Okay, I got a couple of these tube connectors made up here, and basically it's just this piece of tube with a flat washer welded on the end and then just kind of cleaned up. So then the bolt goes down in this hole right here and connects right here to the bottom of this winch. I've already got this one bolted into place. And then with any luck, this bottom plate is just going to slide right over there, and then my ellipse cuts are going to allow it to tilt into place. So let's get this thing bolted in and see if she works. perfection. Perfect. And with this bottom plate tacked into place, this thing feels solid as a rock. I think this is going to work really good. So I just have a few tacks here. I did a tiny tack on the end just to kind of hold it in place while I position these. But I got these tacked here, and what I'm going to do is unbolt these, just knock loose these tacks on the ends right here, and then I can finish weld these tubes up on the bench. And then down underneath here, I'll have to cut these off flush and then kind of grind that down so they look seamless with this plane right here. And then I can bring this back, weld up these corners right here and this back plate here. I'll probably just do a couple of tacks on this back plate instead of trying to weld it the whole length. And then I can move on to the face piece right here. But so far it's looking pretty good. I think this design is going to work really well to strengthen this winch mount up. Okay, pretty straightforward piece here. Ooh, that's a little toasty. Those are the two tubes that connect to the winch plate, and this is what you're going to see underneath the vehicle. I actually just decided to leave my welds kind of slightly exposed there to protect the edges of the tube. I think they look just fine. So we'll bolt this thing back in place and fire up the welder and weld it around the perimeter. Well, just because I got a precision CNC table doesn't mean that I can operate a measuring tape with precision. Put this hole 1 inch too far to the right, so this whole plate's 1 inch to the left. And it looks like it's 1 inch too tall too. This was the last thing I drew up last night. Clearly I should have stopped before drawing this. I guess this becomes a scrap for gussets and stuff. I'll go make my adjustments, move this 1 inch to the side and drop it by 1 inch and cut out another one. All right. There we go. Oh, that looks way better. I like it. All right, get this thing tacked into place. Okay guys, fast forward a couple of days and a couple hundred tack welds and the outer shell of this bumper is done. I didn't have the camera running for a lot of this, but it was pretty basic. Just drop some little slivers in AutoCAD, cut them out, tack them into place, make some adjustments if I didn't like the way they fit, and then move on to the next piece. Now one thing that I'm probably going to add on, but it's not going to be at this time right here because I'm running out of time to finish this, but these lights are the most forward part of this bumper, and they're pretty expensive lights, and obviously those are going to come in contact with brush first. So I'm going to want some way to protect those when I'm driving down brushy trails. And so I'm probably going to rig up some kind of brush guard that bolts to here and is some kind of tubular guard that runs around these lights here. Maybe I'll incorporate it into some kind of a grill guard. But that's going to be for a future project. So as it is right now, I like it. It's got pretty good lines to it. I think it definitely complements the look of the truck. It's definitely strong, although I haven't tried doing a full pull with a winch yet. I'm confident that it's going to be just fine. Well, I'm almost ready to pull this bumper off tonight and burn together all my seams. One last thing I'm going to do here. I would have cut these out with the CNC table if I had knew I was going to put them in, but I actually had these lights installed on my other truck for a while. They're amazingly bright. However, they have a really focused beam, so they don't really cast any light off to the sides. I ended up with some Baja Designs LP9s on my other pickup. So on this truck, I know I'm not going to get a lot of light off to the sides, so I bought some flange mount LED lights that I'm going to put in here. Since I didn't cut these out with the CNC table, I just drilled 4 corner holes. I'm going to cut them out with the cutoff wheel and a grinder. And once I get that done, I can pull this bumper off, put it up on the sawhorses and the welding bench, and get her all burned together. All right, thing looks pretty good. We'll get the other side cut out and then get the bumper off and up on the welding bench. Okay, well I got this thing up on the sawhorses here. Time to fire up the welder and get all these seams burned together. We are making some more progress here. I spent a couple of hours with the DA sander, and I actually put on a little bit of body filler. You can kind of see a little bit. Not over the whole thing, just in areas where I felt like the scratches from the flap wheel were deep enough that the primer may not fill them. So get a little bit more over on this side. But once that body filler dried, I spent a while with the DA sander going over it, taking flap wheel scratches out and weld splatter and things like that. But I think we're ready now. I'm gonna put a couple of coats of self-etching primer on this thing and let that dry, and then we'll wet sand it and see how things look. I've also taken apart the front of the Nissan here. I took the fascia off, got it right here. And we're gonna paint that later today, the same body color. So a two-stage paint, base coat, metallic silver, and a clear coat. And then I've also got to take the winch off of here and pull my winch frame assembly off and prep and paint that as well. I'm not quite as concerned with that one because it's in a protected area. It's not going to see any UV exposure or direct road spray or anything like that. So back at it, I've got a little more prep work to do on this bumper and some painting to do on this fascia. And hey, with any luck, by the end of the week, I'll have this bumper back on the Nissan. Okay, this bumper's been drying now for about 24 hours. I painted it last night, and it looks really good. No runs or sags or any major paint defects or anything like that. Maybe could have spent a couple more minutes with some body filler, dressing up those weld corners, because the gloss kind of shows the areas that I didn't quite get straightened out, but really overall it looks pretty good. See how this light looks in here. Look at the subframe pulled off the truck and primered. It's had about half a day to dry. We'll get it wet sanded tonight and then hang that thing up in place of the bumper and shoot a couple coats of paint on it. While we're waiting for the paint to dry on the bumper and the subframe, let's get this fascia on here. Now the paint on the truck's pretty dirty, and of course the fascia's clean, so may not look like a perfect match. We'll get it installed and see how it matches up to the paint color. Well, the paint's dry on the bumper. I put these lights in, and then my fold-down license plate bracket that goes over the top of the fairlead here. And we got our subframe painted as well. So it's time. I'm gonna bolt this subframe onto the front of the truck, install the winch, spool our synthetic line onto the winch, and then get this bumper shell on. Looking forward to seeing how everything looks together. Okay, well this is a wrap for this video. Got the bumper completely installed, the winch is wired up, and lights are on there and everything else. Now I don't have the lights wired up yet. I'm actually going to save that for another video. I've got a switch panel I'll be installing in the cab, and I'll have a switch for these lights for my air compressor, and then also for some backup lights that I'll be putting in. So hope you guys enjoyed watching, and stay tuned because I've got one more video for this bumper project.